Hey, Rob here for Quadratec. We've got two exciting upgrades for our giveaway Wrangler. If you haven't already gotten yourself entered at a chance to win this Jeep, don't waste any time. The entry period ends on September 15th. Click the info button or the link in the description below to head over to quadratec.com. You can enter up to once per week automatically by making a purchase or by simply filling out that entry form. The two products we're talking about today are from Jeep Performance Parts. Right here on the table, I have their cold air intake that we're going to be installing. It's a very easy install to tackle, and in fact, some of the steps are already taken care of for us because I've already went ahead and installed the Jeep Performance Parts Snorkel on our giveaway Wrangler. Now this Snorkel is going to move the intake for our engine up nice and high to the top of the windshield to help draw in cool, clean, dry air to allow our engine to breathe a bit easier. I always like to mention, however, when you're installing a Snorkel, just because we're moving that intake up to this high location doesn't mean you've turned your Wrangler into a submarine. You still have to be concerned with other sensitive electrical components, as well as things like breathers for your axles, transmission, and transfer case. It does, however, do a great job at drawing in cool, clean, dry air from a much higher location than the stock intake location at about the height of your headlight. So yes, it will lessen the chance of drawing in water to the air intake. And if you've ever been on a trail ride with a group of buddies and you're near the middle or back of the pack, you know that those vehicles in front of you can kick up a lot of dust, dirt, and debris. Well, all of that's getting sucked into your engine's intake, which is going to clog up your air filter, making it tougher for your engine to breathe. By moving that intake location up nice and high with a Snorkel, it's going to move it out of that dust and help your engine breathe in nice, clean air to prolong the life of your air filter. Now this install is not for the faint of heart. While most of it is a simple bolt-on, it does require you to cut a pretty large hole right here in the side of your Jeep's hood. However, I will say that if you can get over the intimidation of cutting that hole, it's actually a pretty easy job to do that you can do with a simple everyday rotary style, Dremel style tool with a small cutoff wheel, a sanding disc, and a file. You will require the removal of your hood so that you can turn it upside down to make the job of cutting that hole a bit easier. And Jeep Performance Parts does include a very detailed cutting template that's going to locate all of your cut marks for you. And then just remember, go slow. You can always cut away more material, but once that material is gone, you can't really put it back. You also want to pay close attention and be careful because we are dealing with a large painted piece here, the hood of your Jeep. You don't want to scratch up the exterior surface while you're working. Now, once you have that hole cut, we also need to go ahead and remove the factory air box to modify that slightly with a new intake tube that's going to match up with the Snorkel. And then we've got a couple brackets that bolt on here to our fender, cowl, and windshield, so that we can mount all of the tube work for the Snorkel. Now, once we have that in place, you would normally go ahead and reassemble the factory airbox. However, today we're going to be installing the Jeep Performance Parts cold air intake to go along with our Snorkel. If we take a look on the table here, you'll see that this kit includes a new intake tube. We'll compare that to the factory tube in just a few moments. We also get this great high flow, washable, reusable style filter. It's a great upgrade over that paper style air filter that came in your Jeep when it left the assembly line. It does come with a new airbox lid with the great Jeep Performance Parts logo and the delicate arch and a little silhouette of a Willys here on the hood. Again, we're going to compare this lid to the factory airbox lid in just a few moments. You will see that we do not have the lower portion of the airbox, and that's because this kit has been designed to reuse that lower airbox portion from the factory, and that's what makes it compatible with the Snorkel, because that new intake tube we've already installed on there is going to work perfectly with the upper components of the cold air intake. Now, normally this kit would also require you to cut a hole in the side of your hood to allow that fresh cold air to be drawn in right there over top of your fender through the side of your hood. You see we get a great Jeep logo on here with a mesh grill intake. We've even got a little guard that can be installed there behind that grill to limit the amount of airflow through there for you. But since we've already gone ahead and cut that hole with our Snorkel, we can totally skip that step. And because we've already removed the lid and air filter while we were completing the install of our Snorkel, at this point the only thing left to do is to go ahead and remove the stock air intake tube, disconnect the sensor harness as well as the breather tube, and then we can loosen the band clamp at the throttle body and remove the two bolts securing the factory intake tube in place. Now, before we install the new Jeep Performance Parts intake tube, I just wanted to take a quick moment to compare them on the table here between the factory piece and the new Performance intake. It's immediately clear that there's a difference between these two pieces. Now, just like you would see in a muffler for your exhaust, your factory intake has been designed to meet a number of parameters, and one of them being noise level. As you can see on this factory intake tube, we have a lot of different resonator chambers built into the intake tube here, and these are going to help to keep your intake nice and quiet. However, they're also going to disrupt that airflow through this tube. You can see on the Jeep Performance Parts intake tube, we get a nice, smooth, free-flowing design that's going to help feed that engine much more air than that stock piece would. Now, the other difference you'll notice between these, if we look at them right there on the end, you can see that the inlet diameter on the tube where it meets the airbox is much larger. The stock piece comes in at about 3 1/8 inches in inside diameter, while the new Jeep Performance Part tube measures a full 4 inches there, again allowing more air to freely flow to your engine. Now, to get the new intake tube installed, all we got to do is go ahead and drop it in place, slipping it over our throttle body. We can tighten down that band clamp and install the other two bolts, securing it to the fan shroud. Then, of course, plug in the sensor harness and the breather tube. Now we're ready to go ahead and drop our new high flow, washable, reusable style filter into the airbox. Simply line it up and drop it right in. Now, before we resecure the lid to the airbox, I wanted to show you the differences between the factory lid and the Jeep Performance Parts lid. Of course, one of the first things you'll notice is the much larger outlet diameter here on the lid to the Jeep Performance Parts piece to match the larger diameter of the new intake tube. But if we flip these lids over, one other thing we can look at here up the underside, we'll see we have these reinforcement ribs on the underside of the stock lid that are going to disrupt the airflow as it passes through the airbox. On the Mopar Jeep Performance Parts lid, we can see we got a great smooth design to the underside of that lid that's going to help improve the airflow as it passes through the box and the intake. Now, before I drop this in place, I already have previously removed the retainer screws from the stock lid. I'm going to start by securing them into the new lid just to get them in place. Then we can drop the lid into the engine bay, installing it into the intake tube. A little bit of soapy water can make that job easier, and secure it with those 4 factory screws. Now, that wraps up the install of both our Jeep Performance Parts cold air intake as well as our new snorkel here on our giveaway Wrangler. Now, if you haven't already gotten yourself entered at a chance to win this Jeep, don't miss out. The entry period ends on September 15th. Click that info button or the link in the description below to head over to quadratec.com, manually fill out that entry form or make a purchase to get automatically entered up to once per week. You could soon be calling this Jeep your very own. Now, of course, if you have any comments or questions about either of the products I installed today, you can always leave those for me down in the comment section below, or contact us directly at any of the options on the screen. And as always, if you haven't already and you like these videos, do me a huge favor, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button as well as the notification icon, so be sure to catch all of our latest videos. Till next time, I'm Rob. I'll see you guys out on the trail.